Hello and welcome to this first tutorial of Jenesis. I'll start with a very brief overview of how Jenesis works, and then I'll get right into how you can use it. So Jenesis is a command line tool for rapid smart contract development. That means that instead of writing all your contracts from scratch, you can start your contract from a growing suite of contract templates that includes tokens, NFTs, proxy contracts, oracles, etc. It also uses the latest compilers and optimizers from the CosmWasm team, and you can easily manage your project environments, whether that's development, testing, or production. It also has an interactive shell and scripting support that lets you execute contract functions, query the contracts, and switch between the various profiles. In this tutorial, we'll create a new project, download a simple contract template, compile and deploy the contract, execute a contract function, and then query that contract to see that it's working. This should all just take a few minutes, so let's get started. First step is to install Jenesis. We can do that with the command pip install Jenesis. This is already installed on my machine, so it may take a little bit longer for you. The next step is to create a new project. We can do this with the command Jenesis new and then give your project a name. We'll call it my project. Now that the project has been created, we can navigate to the folder, and if you look in the folder, you'll see a configuration file called genesis.toml and a contracts folder which is empty. So let's add a contract. We'll add a very simple contract template called starter, which just has a counter that you can increment, and we'll give this a name called my contract. We'll download the template, render the template, and now if we check the contracts folder, we'll have a contract called my contract, and inside we'll have all this source code. Now it's not very important to know the details about the source code, but we see that it's there. So let's compile the contract now. We do this with Jenesis compile. And if this is your first time running this, it might take a little bit longer, but since I've run this already, there's some cache and it's going to be quite quick. So it's already over. You see the logs for the compilation. It generates the schemas, which is also important for interacting with the contract. So now that we have the contract compiled, let's try to deploy it and interact with it. We can do that by opening up a shell. And it will detect the contract. This step takes a little bit of time because it's actually checking the testnet to see if this contract has already been deployed, and that's actually helps the efficiency of the blockchain in general. But it only does this the first time, so after the first time, it'll be a quicker startup. It will also detect any local wallet keys that you have stored. So I have 2 on my machine, and I expect them to detect those 2 keys. And there they are. But you might not have these keys, so let's create a new one. We can do this with my wallet. We'll say local wallet generate. So we have a new wallet, and because this is a testnet, let's generate some funds. And we can do this with faucet that comes preloaded, and we get wealth from my wallet. So this will take a few moments because we actually need to execute a transaction on the blockchain. And once that block is settled, our wallet will have some funds in it, which we will need in order to deploy a contract and to execute functions on it, because it's changing the state of the blockchain. So let's actually deploy a contract, which we have loaded here. We can deploy it, and this will take a few pieces of information. First, there are the instantiation arguments, if your contract has them. This one has 1, which is the count. We'll set the count equal to 0. And now we need to know who's sending this transaction, and we can give it my wallet in order to pay for the transaction fee. Again, this will take a few seconds because this is doing the deployment to the testnet, and we have the address of the contract, so that means it's been deployed, and we can now query it. Let's check what the count is. It should be 0. It is 0. So now let's try to execute a contract function. This one has a function called increment, which simply increments the counter, adds 1 to the count. But since this is a function that we need to execute, we need to say who's sending it. So the sender again will be my wallet. And after a few moments, we can query the contract again, and we see that the count has indeed incremented to 1. So it's a very simple example of a contract, but we have deployed, first downloaded, compiled, deployed a contract, and we have executed a function on that contract and queried a smart contract in just a few minutes. So that's all I wanted to cover in this tutorial, but we will be releasing some more tutorials with more involved examples after this. Thanks.